Thanks for having us, Wendy. We really appreciate the opportunity. At Grimco, we are all about signage and graphics, and like I was saying, it's a passion for us. Again, as nerdy and goofy as it may seem, wide format printing is really something that I find interesting. And there's newer things that I'm learning every single day, different features of different products and specs and available products that we can offer to your network. But today we're basically just going to be going over the ins and outs and the vinyl 101, windows, walls, and floors. So if you have a wide format machine, you'll be able to do almost everything we're going to be talking about today. But there's also plenty of things in here that you guys can probably do, even if you are limited, in your equipment offering. So we'll touch on all sorts of things, but basically windows, walls, and floors is going to be kind of what we're going into.
Excellent. Great. Well, Brian, Allison, thank you so much. As everyone knows, we are featuring a wide format discussion today. We're really excited to be here with our preferred vendor, Grimco. Grimco has been with us for a number of years, and a lot of our members and many of you on the call today are probably also using Grimco for your wide format needs. And if you're not, if you're looking into getting into wide format, definitely give Allison or Jared, who is our another account person, but Allison's on the call today, and certainly reach out to them if you have any questions. And Brian, without further ado, I'm going to turn everything over to you and let you educate us on wide format trends for this year.
Excellent. Sounds great. And it looks like we've got a pretty good group today. I see 14 participants here. We'll have a good portion at the end, or I'll try to save some time for questions. I got nothing else going on today, so I could ramble for 2 to 3 hours. You got me for the rest of the afternoon, so you may have to stop me. But no, we'll go ahead and get this one started. Let's see here. I'm spotlighted. Can you guys see my PowerPoint yet? Is
Yep,
that popping up?
we've got everything up and running, and we're going to take this
Excellent.
till about 2:35 Eastern time, so getting about half hour for presentation, and we'll take about 10 minutes for Q&A at the end. So if everyone can
Sure.
just hold your comments, or if you have a comment that you wanted to put into the chat during the presentation, please go ahead and do that, and we can always address them at the end as well. And please also just make sure you keep yourselves muted during the presentation. So thank you. It's all you.
Awesome. Great. Thank you very much. So yeah, like I mentioned, basically we're just kind of going to be jumping straight into windows, walls, and floors. They are opportunities everywhere. You may not even know it. If you're not in the industry, especially, you're not going to be noticing what goes into all these graphics that you're seeing on a day-to-day basis, but they're all over the place. And for us, that's great news because it's simply opportunity, basically at every single turn. So we'll go into a bunch of different kind of creative examples, because everyone's familiar with a lot of these options and a lot of these examples, but there's a lot of things too that maybe you've never seen before, and you might get some ideas in the back of your mind thinking, oh, this is definitely something we could offer to our customers going forward. And so that's more or less going to kind of be the primary purpose of this. We'll touch on a little bit of pricing. We'll touch on best practices for installation and when to use certain products. But we'll do a deep dive into all three categories: windows, walls, and floors. But the first half of the presentation is just kind of going to be a little bit more of a crash course. So we'll go ahead and jump right on in here. Market trends. So, I mean, if you don't already have wide format printing capabilities, there couldn't be a better spot or a better time to be getting into it. These printers can do all sorts of things. It's really, really incredible. And so long as you're pairing it with the correct material, there's really no limitations for you guys. There's very, very few limitations. But right now we are seeing some really, really good growth in the wide format printing industry. But what we want to kind of nail down too is when you get an inquiry for a job, we don't want you to just be selling one single sticker, one single decal, one single wall graphic. We want you to take that opportunity and see how you can upsell it. There we go. My little sales pitch word, of the day. If you can upsell that into a recurring business, recurring revenue, that's kind of more or less what we're looking for. You want to offer a sort of campaign for your customers as opposed to just a single one-time sale, right? And again, I'm going to send everyone who's on this call, I'll send everyone who gives me their email this whole PowerPoint at the end. So if you're taking notes, awesome, you get a sticker, you're a star student. But if I'm going quickly, you'll get all of this at the end as well. So just something to note. This slide's pretty neat. So I feel like I'm sometimes preaching to the choir when we bring this one up. You're going to see graphics in these spaces all the time. But again, we're just trying to kind of get some creative juices flowing. You can't walk into any one of these locations without seeing some sort of graphic on a window, on a wall, or on the floor. They're all over the place. Whether you think about it or not at the time, now that you're going to be out walking around, you're going to start seeing them all over the place. So these are all going to be opportunities for you guys whenever you're sending your sales teams out there on the field. We'll talk about window graphics. So there's all sorts of different creative things you can do with windows, all sorts of creative things you can do with walls. And I think floors might be my favorite, just because I've seen people get more creative with floors than just about anything else. I love seeing whenever our clients send pictures back to us of what they've done with the material that we're selling. It makes me so happy whenever I can see something super creative. The stair risers are super cool. I've heard they're very difficult to install, but if you can pull them off, they look fantastic. This one's cool. You've got money flowing through a casino to direct traffic towards the poker tournament of the weekend or something like that. I love floor graphics. They're definitely my favorite. We'll jump into cost and selling real quick. So another thing we want to really reiterate is, of course, you're going to have your upfront costs with your material. And of course, you got to consider the ink costs, and even for some jobs, you will need to laminate your material, right? Sometimes you will, sometimes you won't. We'll kind of touch on that a little bit later as well. But these are all your material costs. The number one thing that's easiest for you guys is to really break this down into square foot pricing. So we've got just a couple of different examples here, right? You should be selling your jobs for exponentially more than what you're paying for your material, right? So these, again, just a couple of examples. And I understand this is a pretty wide range. We include this because, we're selling to people all across the country. And the vinyl installation market in Florida is not the same as it is in Des Moines, Iowa, right? So there are going to be major fluctuations depending on where you're living. And you may have already kind of picked up on some of that, but there are definitely some hot spots that are notoriously known for selling materials and jobs like this for very, very low price points. But again, your material cost really isn't going to change that much. We're going to be pretty consistent with that across the board. But your selling price, you're really going to want to kind of factor that in to how much it's going to cost you to do the install and the removal, as well as being competitive within your market. So we'll talk about what the removal and the installation costs kind of look like here in a bit too. We've got a couple examples, but basically you really aren't paying that much for your materials at the end of the day whenever you look at how you're pricing these jobs out. Here's a really cool creative solution to how you can upsell an option, right? So the initial offering here was, or the initial ask, I should say, was for this door and window graphics, announcing this brand new LL Bean store in a mall, right? But that wasn't good enough. That wasn't quite gonna hit the mark. So the sign shop, they came up with this other solution. They're like, okay, what if we did what you want us to do, but then we also offer some floor graphics that flow throughout the mall, directing the flow of traffic straight to the new store, right? So this is a really, really cool one, how the sign shop decided to take a single ask for windows and doors and turn it into something that touched on all three: windows, walls, and floors. Really cool example. You'll see artful installations, right? So not all vinyl graphic jobs are just going to be for information, right? Sometimes they're in lieu of a mural, right? And so you can do some really, really cool stuff with certain materials that can conform to textured surfaces like brick and stone and stucco. So long as you've got the right material and the right tools, you can do all sorts of crazy things. This is a cool example of, again, kind of thinking outside the box. This is a traveling drum display that went around from trade show to trade show, but instead of reapplying vinyl at each stop, think about it, they're going from one trade show in one city to another in another city just within a week span, it'd be a real pain to have to reapply vinyl each and every single time you wanted to put down this new floor graphic. So instead, what they did was they just had pre-applied 4x4 pieces of substrates that had the vinyl installed on them one time. And so then they were able to just pick up those floor pieces and reassemble them at the next trade show like a puzzle, right? They just had them in 4x4 sections. So they weren't actually reinstalling the vinyl each time, but to someone who's not in the industry, they would have no idea, right? So that's thinking outside the box on the installation. This one is interesting. So I like always pointing this one out. I know everyone's muted, but what point or what part of this is in fact printed, right? I mean, we see the banners here. We see a couple little signs down here. The main portion of this image that was printed was the brick. The brick itself. That is not real brick. That was printed and it was installed and removed within about a week. This was approximately an $18,000 job. Very expensive, but the majority of that cost was because it had to be installed and then removed. That requires multiple installers, so you have to pay labor, 2, maybe 3 times over. Then you also have to consider the cost for the equipment. These are pretty tall ceilings. You're not going to be able to do this installation with a ladder. You're going to need to probably rent something like a scissor lift, right? So that's where you're going to have to factor that in. They not only had to rent the scissor lift for the installation, they had to rent it again when they had to come take down this graphic after the trade show was over. So this is about an $18,000 job. But now in comparison, we'll take a look at this one. This is Amway Arena in Orlando. It's where the Magic play. This was about a $10,000 job. So almost half as much as what we just saw. As far as square footage, we could just go ahead and assume that this is pretty similar space from what we just saw. But the main thing about this job that made it so much less for the end user was the arena crew agreed to do the removal themselves. So the sign shop did the printing and they did the install, but then they were able to get creative with their quote and work with the arena crew to take down the vinyl at the end of the season or the end of the promotion or whatever it may be. And so that eliminated the cost to get that scissor lift back out there. They didn't have to send more installers back out there a second time. So, we understand you're trying to upsell as much as you can, but sometimes offering creative solutions to cut costs can be what wins you the job. So I always like tossing that out there. We're a little pressed for time. I'm going to skip past this slide here. This is just some window perf and some mounted boards. This one's really, really cool. So this was a church that took residency inside a former pizza place, right? When you think of a church, the first thing I think of is stained glass, and that's what they thought of too. They wanted to really do everything they could to make this former pizza restaurant feel more like a church. And the easiest way to do that would be with stained glass. Guess what? Stained glass is very, very expensive, but what's a fraction of that? Translucent vinyl. So that's what they did here. They printed the stained glass, they put it up on the windows, and it gave them that feel and appearance that they want. And they were able to achieve that at a price point that was much, much lower than what the end user probably initially thought they were going to have to pay for the real legitimate stuff. But at the end of the day, unless you're going up, 3 inches away from this thing, you're not going to notice any difference. The average Joe Schmo, coming to church that next Sunday, they're going to see that and they're going to think it's beautiful. And unless they're really analyzing it, they're not going to notice a difference. So I love this one. It's another really, really cool creative solution here. Doors. Do not forget about doors. Literally every single business in the entire country, every single brick and mortar business has at least one door. That's $300 for you right there. The nice thing too is oftentimes these businesses have multiple doors, especially if it's a clothing outlet. They're going to have all the changing rooms, locker rooms at schools. Any business is going to have multiple doors, and generally you could charge $200 to $300 to $400 on each door, easy. And the nice thing is they're usually the same size, so that makes a little less work for your graphic team. And they're usually pretty flat. So that's a nice, easy solution for your installation team. Don't forget about doors. A lot of people forget about doors. Elevators, another thing. We'll kind of skim through it here, just again, kind of short on time, but I love showing it because it's nice and creative. Events. This is where, sidewalk graphics are really, really going to shine. We get questions a lot about, okay, I need some floor graphics going outdoors that are going to last 3, 4 years. Sorry, nothing like that exists. There isn't anything with a horizontal exterior outdoor rating that's going to give you a durability factor of more than a year. And even that's like top of the line, super expensive. So generally for exterior graphics like this, that are on the ground, especially in high traffic areas, it's going to look really, really good for about 3 months, right? So if as long as you go into the job understanding that and you communicate that to your customers, then they're going to be happy when the finish line at the 5K looks fantastic for the one day that it needs to be good, right? Because they're probably going to pull it up anyway. So that's kind of something to think about is the sidewalk graphics oftentimes are very, very good for events because events come and go and then they're over and then the graphics are gone, right? So kind of keep that in mind whenever you're selling these jobs is this material will not last long, but usually for what's required, they don't need to last long at all, right? So just kind of thinking about some options here. We talked about locker rooms earlier. I feel like more and more high schools and universities are just starting to plaster more graphics on just about every square inch of their hallways and locker rooms. These are great opportunities. Don't forget about locker rooms and just schools in general. Green solutions. This was something that, when I started with Grimco about 6 years ago, I would have had to kind of wave the white flag. There were not too many great recyclable options. The tides have turned on this, people. It's something that we now have plenty of offerings for. So if you ever have an end user coming to you with a need for a job, but it has to be recyclable, don't turn that down. Ask us, and we'll be happy to refer you to the best options that would work for your job that would still check off all the boxes to have a green recyclable print, right? So there are options out there for vinyl, for papers, for rigid boards. We can find something for you. Museums and zoos. We should probably lump zoos in here too. There's graphics all over the place at those types of venues. They're usually up for quite a long time, but you can tell kids like to peel stickers and they like to touch things, and oftentimes these do need to be replaced. So museums and zoos are really, really great opportunities for you guys. You can mount graphics onto substrates that extrude off the wall. You can get really creative with these sort of jobs. Okay, lamination. We talked about it a little bit earlier. But why do you want to laminate, right? It's a hotly contested debate, especially if you're in any sign and graphic like Facebook or Reddit pages. I'm in a ton of them. And people are always talking about like, okay, well, I've got this job inside. Why would I want to laminate it? Like, that doesn't make sense. Like, it's not going to fade. The sun's not going to affect it indoors. You're absolutely right. And so oftentimes people do try to skip the lamination because it's the fastest way to save on materials and labor. But one thing we do like to encourage is if you think that there's ever a chance that that wall is going to need to be cleaned, so think restaurants, schools, waiting rooms, hospitals, if those walls ever need to be wiped down with any sort of cleaning agent at all, if there isn't a lamination on that wall, you're going to damage it. The print is going to fade. It's going to streak. There's going to be problems created by cleaning a surface that isn't laminated. So that's the main reason why we'd still encourage using a laminate indoors. Again, it doesn't have to be a UV protected laminate because, again, there's no sun, so you don't have to worry about it fading, but you still need to protect the vinyl and the print itself if you ever want to clean these surfaces. We had to tell a lot of people this very unfortunate news, especially in the peak of COVID. Everyone was wanting to clean and sanitize every surface. If their walls weren't laminated, they were kind of out of luck. So I always like bring this one up. So now we'll do a deeper dive in all three of these segments. We're kind of running close to time, so we're going to kind of speed through here. But again, we'll try to leave some time for questions at the end. If you're taking anything away from this presentation today, I'm going to have this same slide for windows, walls, and floors. These are the #1 questions you need to ask your customers and your clients whenever you have a job land in your lap. Because if you don't ask these questions, you're not going to get the information needed to recommend the right material. Your clients and your customers, they think they know what they want. They don't. That's up to you. You need to be their, statue and their strong pillar to lean on, because they're not going to know the ins and outs of different adhesive types and properties of lamination, right? So you need to ask them to help them determine what they need. Is this going inside or outside? Easy one right there. Is this something that needs or that you need it to not have adhesive? Because sometimes that's an important factor. What type of longevity are they expecting? I like to rephrase this one, and I like to say, how long do you want this to look good? Because I feel like that's kind of two different things, but that's the more simple way to phrase it for your clients. They'll make more sense of that. And then do you want this to be opaque one way or something more see-through? Because there's options for all of them. But now let's take a look at those options, right? Static cling, great option. Very, very good for short-term applications. Most probably commonly used for oil change stickers. I've got one on my car that I got the other day. That's where you're probably going to see them a lot, but restaurants and even just storefronts are great. We see static cling used for that all the time, because they're really good if you've got a customer that has just a sale, right? That's maybe lasting through the summer or through the fall. It doesn't have to be the most high-end, expensive material that's going to last 10 years, because the event isn't lasting that long. So why would you spend more money on material when you could get something like a static cling, which is generally pretty economical, that's still going to be able to do the same job, right? So static cling is always a good, reliable option that does not have any adhesive, really is only going to primarily stick to windows and glass. Now, glass appeal is something similar. It also does not have any adhesive. It uses a micro suction technology, which I'm afraid not enough people in our industry know about this material, because it's really, really neat. But this will have a way better durability rating. It is more expensive than static cling, but it really, really looks good. The cool thing about this is, because it doesn't have adhesive, if you install it incorrectly, pull it off, try it again, pull it off, try it again. The only thing you need to install this is a squeegee and a spray bottle of water. It's pretty simple stuff to put up. Even I could do it, right? So it's not that hard. Glass finishes are something that I feel like gets left behind in our industry quite a bit. People see a break room or conference room kind of like this, and they see that frosted glass look, and often they just immediately think that that's probably etched into the glass itself. Usually it's not, because that sort of glass is very, very expensive, and you can achieve the same results by using a patterned film that has, either an etched or a dusted or a frosted look to it. We sell plenty of different options, and there's even options that you can print to. So hospitals, apartment complexes, office spaces, this is a pretty good opportunity for them. Then there's also the clear film. So this is like what we saw earlier with the stained glass. Depending on your printer, so if you have a printer that can print white point printing, then you can get white in your graphics. Otherwise, you can still print to this material even if you don't have a white point printer. You just won't be able to have white in your graphic, if that makes sense. So you can still print to it. It's totally fine. You would just do like a reverse print if you're doing an interior install. There's all sorts of ways to get creative here, but not all digital vinyl is going to be white. There is some clear options as well. And then lastly, for windows, we've got perf. This is another old reliable. This material is going to have a bunch of little teeny tiny hole perforations all throughout it. And there's different hole patterns, where sometimes we'll sell the material that has larger holes, which provide better visibility, but the resolution of the image itself isn't quite as good. And just as a reminder, from the inside of this store, for example, you'd be able to look out and you wouldn't even see this graphic at all. But from the outside, looking at the printed surface, you see, this mom and her son and this guy over on the right. You see the full graphic. We're going to see this at, mainly with storefronts, but then even some vehicles as well. There's some specs that we'd recommend, if you're ever trying to decide what material or what hole pattern to use for, your given application. Okay, so that was windows. Now here's the walls. Again, if you're taking notes of anything, this should be it. Here's some number one questions. Is your wall smooth or textured? Right? That's important. That'll help us determine, what material you're going to need. Is it sealed or unsealed, or, slash, was it recently painted? This might be the number one question in the whole entire PowerPoint. ask if it was recently painted. If your customer or your client, if they don't know, you're probably good, right? But if they say, oh yeah, it was painted about 3 weeks ago, but it's dry now, man, be wary. Be very, very wary of that. Do a wall test with a vinyl, strip of scrap vinyl or something. Double check to make sure that that paint is done outgassing, because even if it's dry, it's still probably there's a bunch of chemical reactions that are going on with that paint that are, helping it to bond to the surface. It might be dry to the touch, and you might not scuff it or anything if you lean up against it, but there's still gases that are escaping that paint, and gas trying to escape through something that's covered with vinyl, that just creates a bubble. So that's the last thing we want. We don't want it to think that, oh, we had a material failure here. More than likely, it was a paint issue, but we'll touch on that a little bit later too. Does this need to be removed within a certain amount of time? That's a big question, because there's material that'll stick up forever, but if you pull it off after 10 years, it's probably pulling half the wall with it. So, let us or ask your customer if they need to pull this off. And then will people be rubbing against or picking at these graphics? Also known as, is this in an elementary school, right? Um, Bonus little tidbit here, matte vinyl, or at least using a matte overlaminate finish. That's going to be the best for interior walls. It generally works best with most fluorescent lighting. So, okay, Wendy, I know we're crushing it on time. Feel free to tell me to shush at any point
No,
here.
you're good. Just keep going.
We'll
Yep.
keep going. If you're looking for materials to do textured walls, whether it's indoors or outdoors, generally you're going to be using something that's going to be about the same as what you'd be using for a vehicle. And that's because it's going to be a cast vinyl. There's a big difference between cast and calendared vinyls. We could have a whole separate PowerPoint on that. Wendy, add to the list. I'm happy to do it. But cast is going to be best for something like this, because the vinyl will really it can recess down into the crevices between the bricks and the concrete, or even like a more rough brick concrete surface, right? So you would want to use something cast or something that's rated for textured surfaces. 3M is just on here as the example. We sell Avery and General Formulations and Orifal and Brightline. They're all going to have solutions for vinyl series that can complete a lot of these same things. But if you're doing anything textured, make sure you're using the correct vinyl, right? Walls. So again, here's another kind of cool example of how a lot of these can conform to the surfaces to which they're applied. But this is Graphics, and Graphics is really neat. It's not actually a vinyl. It's got an aluminum base, and it's completely recyclable, but it's also printable. So it's a very unique material. It's kind of sitting in its own category, but it's really, really neat. For the smooth, is generally what we see people using for walls. It looks just like a painting. Kind of going back to those painted wall surfaces, especially if it was recently painted, find out. But oftentimes we run into situations where vinyl will fail because the wall was painted with a low VOC paint, right? VOC, that is volatile organic compounds. And almost every paint, every gallon of paint you ever buy will mention its VOC levels. Sometimes it'll just say high or low, or it'll give a percentage. Find out, because if it's a low VOC, generally that repels the adhesive properties of most vinyls. And so, if you run into a situation like that, we would typically recommend going with something much more high tack. There are vinyls that can, combat this issue. Rad Graphics is cool. I'm sure you guys are familiar with Fathead. They used to have a whole lot more commercials than I feel like they do these days, but you could get a giant logo of your favorite sports team or your favorite athlete, or they even had licensing with Disney. You could put them up on your man cave wall and then take them down and put it up in your garage, take them down, put it in your kid's room, take it down. It was really, really cool stuff that had a removable and changeable adhesive property to it. That material is Rad Graphics. That's all it is. This is my favorite product that we sell. It comes in a couple different series and a couple different finishes, but it's super, super cool. It's rated for 1 year, but it will last up on a wall for much longer. This picture was in our St. Louis sales office, was up for 8 years before it finally had to come down because they were renovating. So it's not going to fall off on its own, but it will bond a little bit more heavily to a wall if you leave it up there. Phototex is the name brand version of Rad Graphics. Rad Graphics is our in-house brand. Phototex is essentially the same item. Really, really cool stuff, and comes in a couple different finishes as well. You do not need to laminate this. It's already pretty thick. I mean, if you're wanting to laminate it for cleaning purposes, we would still recommend it, but it's usually not something that needs to be laminated. There are materials that, if you're wanting to apply to a smooth surface, but make that smooth surface look textured, there's options for that as well. Here's just one example of that. And then wallpapers. So it goes up just like regular wallpaper. It's water activated. This one in particular is really cool. We see it used pretty heavily in hospitals because it does have that mildew resistance and mold resistance. It's also flame resistant. The HP PVC free wallpaper, say that 5 times fast. This is a really, really neat product. It doesn't have adhesive. It just simply goes up like any other wallpaper would with water. Now, 3M40C, we'll talk about this one again under floor graphics, but what's it doing here in wall graphics? 40C is probably the most versatile product that we sell. You can use this with all sorts of different things. It comes in clear. It also comes in white. It is a calendared film, so generally we don't recommend calendared going on vehicles. This is kind of the one exception. On slight curves, you can still put this high performance calendared option on like the side panel of a door, right? So 40C is a really fantastic product. It's got a great durability, and it's also removable. And for the price point, there aren't too many products out there that can compete. So lastly, we got floors. Wendy, I'm sorry, we'll cruise through floors real quick. I promise we'll be fast. But here's the number one questions. Inside, outside, that's nothing new. How long do you want this to look good? Very important. Is it smooth or textured? And then just like with the walls, was it recently sealed or painted? Very important. And then lastly, tidbit, a little bonus piece here. If you're doing floor graphics, you do need to make sure that you're using a non-slip overlaminate on top of your floor graphics, because the last thing anyone wants is a lawsuit. Fortunately, there are plenty of options to keep you safe and prevent anything from happening, so long as you're using a correctly rated overlaminate to provide that non-slip certification. The ASTM, that stands for American Society for Testing Materials, they've spec'd out a lot of these products. So if you're ever curious about what material may or may not work for floor graphics, just let us know and we can recommend something that will work. Here's a 3M option for sidewalk graphics. Again, really, really good for short-term applications. You're going to get a solid 3 to 6 months out of this. Illuma Graphics back into the fold. This time we're looking at their grip option. This will actually have a textured surface that provides that non-slip property. Brightline Multi-Grip. So Brightline is our in-house brand for most digital products. Multi-Grip's going to be the closest option we sell to Illuma Graphics. It's not made with aluminum. It's instead a PVC film, but it's still going to have a lot of the similar properties where you do not laminate this at all. It's already 14 mil thick, very, very easy to install. Good for both for walls or floors. But again, you're gonna be lucky to get about 6 months out of this, right? Again, set the expectations. That's the most important thing for you guys. And here's our best friend, 40C, once again. 48C is going to be almost the same material, just with a slightly higher durability rating. But other than that, they're going to meet a lot of the same specs. You can use them on floors. And then here's Avery's equivalent, right? But again, number one thing, you just want to make sure that you're pairing the correct non-slip overlaminate with those floor options, right? So like right here, we've got our Brightline, in-house version. So if you're looking to do floor graphics on tile or something smooth, or, carpet graphics, there's options for that. And then you would just want to pair it with the correct non-slip overlaminate to keep everyone nice and safe, both out of the hospital and the courtroom. So that's it. That was we rushed through that one. I hope I didn't go too quickly here, but I wanted to leave a little bit of time left over for questions. So Wendy, I appreciate you letting me go over a little bit here.
No, absolutely. Thank you so much, Brian. I appreciate you,
Yeah.
giving us this really great overview on floors, walls, and graphics. Because I think a lot of members that are out there, doing wide format, they may be touching on some of this, some may be working in these areas more than others. So I'd like to put it out to the members and the attendees today. If anyone has any questions, please go ahead and unmute yourself, or you're welcome to raise your hand or put something in the chat. We are here for a few more minutes with Brian to get as much of his expertise on this area as possible. In the meantime, I just, knowing that wide format has really taken off over the last, 10 years, where are you seeing, I mean, are there any emerging technologies, or is there anything coming down the pipe that we should keep an eye out for in the wide format arena? Any technologies, any trends that you're kind of seeing in your crystal ball that we should know about?
Yeah, absolutely. And Allison, feel free to chime in here as well if you'd like. Really, some of the main advancements that I've seen since I've been in the industry for about 7 years now is the cost factor. There have been new technologies that have kind of come into play. There's now pretty affordable printers that can print white ink. That wasn't something that was even really that widely available when I first started, and now it's all over the place. So like we are seeing some advancements like that, but the price point is really kind of what's been coming down, and that's been allowing more and more people to dip their toe into this sector, and they realize, oh, this isn't that daunting. And same thing with the materials too. There's just such a wide variety of different options. I mean, we only scratch the surface here. This is a fraction of our portfolio, and I feel like we touch on a lot of stuff. So whether you're wanting to do windows, walls, and floors, or if you're just wanting to stick to bumper stickers and yard signs and banners, I mean, there's a niche for you somewhere in the industry, and you don't have to do everything. In fact, I'd recommend against it. I try to focus on just, what's your strength and what's your bread and butter, and just go hard at that.
Okay, great. That's super helpful. And Allison, do you have anything to add there?
Yeah, absolutely. They're always coming out with new equipment, new materials that whatever a customer comes to you, we can help you. Our website is amazing. Even if you've never done a certain application, you can go to our website and say, kind of answer those questions that he says. Do you need it to be long-term or short-term, inside or outside? So you really can get a great kind of informational piece just from looking at our website. And then in the chat, I put our email group that it gets all of us on our team that's here to support you. So if you do have an application or an idea, but the best thing to start with is, what customers are you already working with now? And would this interest any of them to be able to have you offer that? And then you guys as a network that maybe not all of you have printers, but if somebody locally in your network does, partner together on a couple jobs to try to see if you source it through them, and then you see, hey, this is a lot easier than we thought. It sounds scary, it sounds overwhelming, but it is such an easy process to be able to do once you're ready for it. But that's where we're happy to support you on the equipment side, on the consumable side, and just even the visions. Our YouTube channel has a couple different applications. We constantly on our social media will showcase different customers. But the nice thing is just to know that it isn't as intimidating as it sounds. And between your network and our partnership, we're happy to make it even easier to do. But the best thing is the customers that you're already working with, one of these applications is something that they're sourcing out from somebody else. So that's a great way to start.
So just ask the question to your customers, hey, are you buying wide format somewhere else? Is there anything we can help you with? Randy Ross at Caspari asked, I have Epson SureColor pigment based printer and Canon Image ProGraph 4100 pigment printer. What is a good vinyl and coating solution for signage and or say a placemat for a picnic? I know they won't last and are considered aqueous inks, but what is out there? Good question. Thank you, Randy.
Really good question. And Allison, I'll try to answer this best my ability here, and feel free to chime on in as well if you'd like. Aqueous is tricky. I'll be the first to say it. It is tricky. I'd say we have 90% of our offerings will be compatible with latex and solvent in UV and resin inks, probably would be the most common, but that's not to say that we don't have offerings for aqueous as well. The only issue with aqueous is, just as its name suggests, it's a water-based ink. And so it's really going to run into problems if it's around any areas that could get wet. So for a placemat with a picnic, there's a couple different products that do kind of come to mind. I would just be concerned about the ink bleeding. You would need to use an appropriate overlaminate, but at that point with a placemat for a picnic, so are we talking about like I'm envisioning like a picnic blanket, I guess, or maybe something that you would use to cover the picnic table, like a tablecloth, if you will. Um, we would have to kind of get creative. I'd have to think about that one in particular. It's a really good question, but again, I want to just reiterate there are plenty of options that we offer. I just looked. We have over 80 different digital media options for aqueous printers. So we'd have to just determine, exactly what width roll that you're looking for. It's 38, 42, 48, 54, 60. We got plenty of different options. For that particular example, I might need to do a little bit more digging.
But I would almost say, like you said, anything with aqueous that's going to be meant for indoor, short term outside, but it's as soon as the water and the elements hit it, it's not going to last. So what you're going to want to do is make sure you laminate it. You can even encapsulate it. And that's what I would say. I would say if we're going to quote a job today and you already have that printer, I would say print on the paper and then either outsource it to be encapsulated, which means that you're kind of putting laminate on the top and bottom of it, so it almost seals it, kind of like and I think of it almost as, like the holiday ones you have for the kids or different things that come out is kind of what I'm thinking placemat wise, is what I think maybe you're going at. But that's where I'd say that if the paper in the middle of it is aqueous, that's totally fine. Just make sure that it's completely sealed around it with a lamination.
Go ahead,
Yeah,
Randy. I see you unmuted. It looks like you do
I
a
am
laminate.
muted, yeah. So we have a complete bindery here and we have some old die cut equipment. And for our big jobs, we're going to a Connecticut printer and they're on a lithography press, even up to 5 colors, PMS colors and everything. That's paper. That's uncoated or just plain paper. And we then either sell them as paper, real temporary, or we take the paper and have them laminate it before they ship it to us. At which point we put it on a backing board, and then we even put a non-skid thing on the back or felt, depending. So we make a multi-layer placemat, which is laminated on the top surface only, because we're gluing everything below that. I mean, it's pretty much stays flat. But I don't get involved in that in printing because inkjet printing, per square inch, I go down to, not per square foot, and the time, I think my last estimate is I could do you a 1,000 placemats, on canvas on my aqueous printer. And I was still researching what type of coating I would put on that canvas. So a matte canvas, matte inks, beautiful pigment inks. But if I buy Clear Shield or something that's also an aqueous coating that dries down to 1,000th of an inch, and then you do a second one, 2,000ths of an inch, stuff like that, it's quite the process and a very slow process with the pigment printers I use for proofing to make them productive all of a sudden to get 1,000 placemats. And with all the steps, the cost is way more than going to a big printer and having them print 15, 20,000 of them and run them to an automatic lamination and, die cut them on their bops if they're paper. And we die cut the ones that are laminated ourselves and back them. So, but the owner was interested in something more textural, more artsy, like a canvas feel or, textured stuff. But I'm still worried about the coating. I know if I put my cup of coffee on it in the morning, it would be fine 5, 10, 15 minutes. But that aqueous coating, when it'll start turning milky white as liquids sit on it. It's great for UV protection, 200-year, for giclée or art reproduction on the walls at canvas, great. But I was being asked if they could use it in a horizontal and get wet stuff on it. And I said, well, that's a tough one. So I have used vinyl on pigment printers up to 8 feet tall, put grommets in them, put little stands for shows and stuff, and I have coated those as well. But again, I treated it like a piece of artwork, and if somebody went to clean it with a solvent or something, all aqueous would just, boom.
Yep.
I am kind of stuck because we don't own anything like an HP UV printer or anything like that. Not at this point, but as the requests keep coming in, I'm just trying to stay up to speed as to where we'd have to go to get something that's cured that will can be cleaned or laminated again or whatever. And this has been great for me, just listening to you guys. It's great.
Good.
Well, Randy, thank you very much for your feedback there, and certainly for your question. I know I'm certain that Allison and Brian would be thrilled to get a call from you and kind of talk through the jobs you're thinking about, because it sounds like there could be something they can help you out there with. And yeah,
I
good
might
luck.
still try some of this stuff. I mean, if somebody's just wiping off a placemat that's a canvas placemat, and I have some sort of a cheaper gallon of coating with a foam roller I can put on in 30 seconds and it dries down to nothing. I mean, if it holds up,
Right.
I mean, our
There you
current
go.
placemats, if I put my coffee pot on it and 6 months later, it's starting to infiltrate the edges and it's all laminated. So none of them really last. So I'm aware of that.
Yeah.
Encapsulating is a good word, though. We only laminate the top surface. I'm sure if we encapsulated the whole thing, but like I said, we're already gluing it down to a bunch of stuff. So
Great.
lots of thoughts.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you,
No, thanks for
Randy.
sharing, Randy. I appreciate that.
Thank you. So
I'll-
great. Well, we are
I'll,
up on.
mute.
No, you're good. So we are up in time. So I want to just thank everyone who attended today. Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Allison, for giving us your time today and giving the members some deeper insights into the wide format technologies that are available and ways that they can speak to their customers and get some more sales for their wide format presses. So I hope everyone has a wonderful day. This will be on our YouTube channel for replay. Brian, we'll make sure we'll get the PowerPoint out to everyone who was on today as well. And everyone have a wonderful day. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, guys.
So much.
Bye.
Everybody, bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Yeah.